Well, I'm going to give a 65th shot to reboot. Welcome back, folks, to, essentially last night, this morning, whatever it's going to be. I almost left the league, as most of you know. I am so glad I didn't. I want to thank Matt again. Thank you for your patience with me and my mode of insanity in the offseason. As much as I miss the Braves, I've had a good time being the general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates and, hopefully, once again, your, as unbiased as I can be, league reporter, along with my friends Anonymous GM, John Comey, Scott Gessford, who I think you could call anything but biased. The man definitely has an American League allegiance, but we'll give it a shot. I wanted to refamiliarize myself, and honestly, probably a lot of you, with the league as a start to whatever the fuck this is. My guess would be a standalone podcast that I don't revisit for 3 months. But if I can bring myself to any level of consistency, hopefully a semi-weekly update on the league and the happenings. Think of the NBA Ringer podcast. Think of, obviously I ripped the name off of last week tonight. There's another podcast in sports I listen to that is inspiration for these things, right? With different kinds of things. There's an NBA podcast I listen to that does like a wheel of fandom. They'll spin a wheel, and every week they will end up as a fan of that team, and they'll talk in depth about what's going on with that particular organization. At the end of the podcast, the rest of it's still focused on what happened this week in the NBA. Well, in this particular case, what happened this week in MLB Pro, specifically. We'll see. But like I said, we need to reestablish some ground on where we are, and I think put some context to what that actually means, right? So I had to go back and manually pull some results from the end of 2023 to really paint a picture of where the league was at the end of the season and what some of these teams doing what they're doing now means. But I think it's a good place to start, right? Maybe ask some questions about what this could mean and what we should expect. Over the next coming weeks, I think it's a fair piece to look at predictions for where this season ends. If you look around the league, first place to second place in every division is fairly close outside of the National League West, which is an interesting, aberration to talk about. So I think predictions would be fair, right? I think trade deadline speculations would be fair. We're still a little bit away from that, but not as far as you may think. And there are some teams here that you got historical sellers selling again. Think about Oakland. Think about Detroit. Think about Chicago. Think about the Yankees in some capacity, right? You have some non-traditional sellers that may be looking to sell. You've already seen the Rockies talk about it. You've seen the Dodgers start to talk about it. Some really interesting pieces in both of those organizations. The Mariners have been fucking flirting with it for a minute now, but technically, they're sitting outside, right on the cusp of that wild card spot and more danger than they've ever been in terms of, hey, can they hang in there and make the playoffs? You have the Nationals, Mets. Look, there's a billion teams. So let's start here before I just babble on. Let's refamiliarize ourselves. I gotta stop saying that phrase. Let's catch up to speed on what's going on in MLB Pro around the league, right? And I think there's no better place to start with that than just a simple look at, hey, where are we right now? And to me, where were we last year? At the end of the season, I couldn't pull point in time stuff, so I don't know where we were at this point in 2023. At the end of the season last year, we'll start in the American League East, I think. At the end of the season last year, the standings looked as follows. Toronto in first place with a 95-67 record. Baltimore in second at 91-71. Tampa in third at 87-75. Boston in fourth at 70-92. And the Yankees in fourth at 54-108. where we sit right now, okay, cannot believe I forgot how many games were in an NBA season. Good God, are in an MLB season. 162. For those of you that are as dumb as I am. Where we sit right now, the Red Sox in first place at 38 and 22. Toronto in second at 36 and 24. Tampa in third at 33 and 27. Baltimore in fourth at 28 and 31. And the Yankees in fifth at 21 and 40. Let's assume for 5 seconds that there are no changes made to the winning percentages of these teams as we go forward. I understand that's a fool's errand, but just for fun, what you have is a Red Sox team on pace to win 100 games for the first time in team history and to win the division for the first time, I think, since 2013, which is the year, in case anyone was curious, and for those of you that weren't around, that the Red Sox won the World Series in 2013. So can Boston sit here and finish this season in the way that they've done so, right? They've played great. Now, I've heard some interesting trade rumors coming out of this organization, that people that I never would have thought available being said that they are available. You also have guys like Dave Allen and Todd Kuhn that are coming up on contract issues, if I'm not mistaken. But the team has been exceptional offensively. Can they hold back Toronto, who has gone out of their way to make some moves, as they always do? Toronto's lineup, Toronto's team, they never look the same way they do end of season as they did at the start. 17 and 10 in April, 15 and 11 in May, off to a slow start in June, but it's early, right? Can Toronto be held back by Boston? Can Tampa's start continue? While they sit in third place, exactly where they sat last year, they're off to a better start, right? If I'm not mistaken, I guess I can't prove that because I don't know exactly where they were this time last year, but they're pacing towards 89 wins. Would be a 2-win improvement over last year. Not massive, but it's worth noting, particularly in a division that, I mean, there's no angels in this division, right? So that somebody could make the run at this. I am stuck talking too far beyond. The part that's interesting to me, I guess, about the American League East, if we look at last year to this year, is the fall off of the Orioles and the rise of the Red Sox. We talked a little about the rise of the Red Sox. The team's good. They've been good. They're still missing a piece or two, from my perspective, right? Where do can Robert Hassel sit in the starting lineup all year and really be the guy? Can this pitching staff really continue what it's doing? I don't think so without any changes. Toronto's just too aggressive in the trade market. You have to figure that they'll go find a guy to replace. I guess Don Winston technically replaces Raul Dominguez at some point, but Anthony Rendon hasn't hit the way you'd expect. Braulio Pardo definitely seems to have finally kind of gone off a cliff. Diego Cardia. There are some holes here in this lineup that you'd have to expect that Mitch will go out and address. Their pitching staff's excellent, though, with Appel, Kershaw, Gilmartin, Alberto Vega at the back of this lineup, Sean Stevens at the 4 spot. Their bullpen's very good. So the Jays won't fall off a cliff because they can pitch, but what moves are made by the Red Sox and potentially the Rays? The Rays have been a relatively quiet organization until they made that move, sending O'Neill Cruz off to get it. I think it was just Pedro Jimenez is looking for a backup infielder, really. Will they make any moves of consequence? I doubt it. I don't. John Comey doesn't strike me as somebody who's going to go out and make a big swing this offseason, or in season. And Drew Hastings and the Orioles, look, they're just a lack of creativity in that front office that has seen what was at one point an exceptionally deep, ridiculous minor league system sort of fall to shreds without really producing a superstar. I mean, they've still got names. Don't get me wrong. There's still guys. If you look at their system, their top tier prospects, and I forget the name of the fellow who is sitting at the top of this list here. Is he not? Who am I thinking of? Julio Rodriguez. Yeah, Julio Rodriguez is a 23-year-old, should be the top tier prospect for everybody. He's not even starting. Not starting every game. He started 25 games for them this season. He's sitting on the bench as a 23-year-old superstar guess he's just not playing against righties. Is that what I'm seeing? He's not playing at all. Julio Rodriguez is not a starter in either lineup. At the behest of what? Who are the corner outfielders here? Alfredo Morales is shooting .224, starting in right field. And he started 45 games, by the way. Hit .224 last year, too. .282 the year before. He had a negative WAR last year. This guy's taking up a corner outfielder spot. And Ty Detmer. And I like Ty Detmer a lot. Don't get me wrong. But he's 27 years old. He's having the career, like a year of his life here. So Ty Detmer I got no problem with. In theory, I have a problem with him starting over Julio Rodriguez. But why the sweet holy shit is Alfredo Morales starting in right field? And it's moves like that, to me, that sit here and say, the Orioles aren't going to catch the East. Holy shit, I just spent 10 minutes talking about the American League East. This is not the point of this podcast, but I think you can safely assume that this is a three-team race. It's the Rays, it's the Jays, it's the Red Sox. And if Drew Hastings decides to wake up, okay, great. Maybe the Orioles can catch up here. Wow, what the fuck? I gotta get focused. The Central last year looked as follows: Minnesota in first place, 99 and 63. Kansas City in second place, 85 and 77. Detroit in third at 80 and 82. Cleveland in fourth, 72 and 90. And the Chicago White Sox at the bottom of this division at 63 and 99. Your league this year looks much the same. Twins in first at 31 and 29. You don't love that winning percentage if you're the Twins, although it doesn't seem to matter because nobody else in the division is succeeding either. The Royals in second at 28 and 33, a big fall off from where they finished last year. Cleveland at 25 and 35, actually an improving pace for them, but not enough to make any difference here. Although they sit 6 games back, I can't picture that team making any sort of move. To paint that picture, they are +4 in Pythagorean record, and that's not going to hold. Detroit at 24 and 36, a pretty decent fall off from their 80 and 82 record they had last year. The Tigers are entering version 2.0 of their rebuild, obviously, as they just do not have the faith that this is the squad to bring them anywhere, right? I think Chris Scalise is taking the majority of the abuse for this thing, but they're just not scoring runs. They're not pitching well either, outside of Matthew Liberatore, which would be interesting to see. Does he survive this rebuild, or is he a big piece that brings back some stuff? I don't know. There's a lot of pieces here to build a hell of a farm system if they trade off a lot of people. And then finally, the White Sox at 24 and 37. Same story here. In this division, the White Sox are heading towards their 4th straight sub-70 win season. They do not seem to be an organization that has this thing figured out yet. I don't know exactly what the plan is in Chicago. I haven't asked, to be fair. Greg did a great job in Pittsburgh before he left Pittsburgh and went to Chicago, and him and Hodges switches teams back in the day. That didn't really work out for either organization as the White Sox took a plummet. The Pittsburgh Pirates never really dug out of that hole either. So, you're sitting here looking at the White Sox and figuring, hey, what's the plan? I'm sure Greg's got something. It'd be an interesting interview, actually, if I could ever get him to come onto the podcast and talk about, hey, what are the White Sox doing here? Would be really, really fascinating to talk about. The Royals not breaking 500 is a little heartbreaking. It was a lot of fun to watch this team get built. I remember the promise and the kind of the hype around the Royals 2 years ago. They finally broke through 500 last year. The struggles early have been tough to watch. Maybe they pull out of this thing. They're not so deep in the whole 5 games under 500 that, figure they played 6 games over 500 from here to the end of the year. You told me that, I'd believe you. So maybe they finish over there, but it's not pacing towards the right situation here. That's the Central. The Central's interesting. I mean, to some degree, it's interesting, but the Twins have dominated this division for so long, it kind of becomes uninteresting at a certain point. I forget how many years in a row. Last year they did not. They finished not. The Twins have not won the division one time since 2017. First, third, which is a weird aberration. They finished under 500 that year actually, and came right back first, and then first again. They have won 90 games. 4 games or better in every single one of those seasons, except that one weird season they finished under 500. That was the COVID year. COVID really hit Minnesota pretty hard, I guess. But the Central is the Twins division. It has been for years. Aiden and Rocky went back and forth. Aiden, not in the division anymore, obviously, but that was never a true rivalry in terms of production, as the Twins continuously won the division over and over again, and the Guardians finished in second. God, I hope Aiden didn't hear that. There we go. I mean, that's just a less interesting division. And then the West, honestly, I mean, you hate to just throw sand on royalty, but the West might be the least interesting division in baseball. And that's so impossible to say about a division that finished the way it did last year. The division finished last year, Seattle finishing in first at 101 and 61, the Angels finishing in second at 101 and 61, and the Astros finishing third at 162. They had three 100-game winners in this division. And me, sitting here as an outsider, I am bored to death by it because it has been nothing but Angels and Mariners to some degree dominating for years. The Astros being the third leg in this little romantic duo, desperately trying to sneak into the bed. And this year was supposed to be the year they did it, and it very well still could be. They're only a game and a half back of the Angels, but the Angels looked like they may fall off for a second. They won 10 straight, maybe it was 12 straight at some point, like just to prove, hey, we're back. You just can't put any team in here that isn't the Angels or the Mariners without it actually happening, because it just hasn't happened in a really, really long time. The Rangers and the A's are just aftermath, and I hate to put it that way because I really like some of the teams they put together. The pieces, at least. This never been seemed to be cohesive. In fact, I think I was looking at this. Oakland hasn't finished above 500 since 2013. If you would have asked me when the last time Oakland finished above 500, just based on how much attention that team gets in this league, because Scott's one of the more interesting, outgoing, and active GMs in the league, I would have told you probably a couple of years ago. But no, it's been it's been over a decade since they finished above 500. Not even above the Mendoza line in the division, just above 500 at all. They actually won the division in 2013. It's been a long time since then, and they will not do so this year as the rebuild seems to be on in Oakland. It is perpetually on to some degree, it seems, but it's certainly on again. Honestly, the team I'd like to see rebuild is Texas. They've had so many pieces come through there. Texas is one of those ballparks that a lot like Colorado really seem to affect the hitters and the pitchers in a certain way. But Texas is never fully really committed to a rebuild. They don't draft particularly well. Although, you say that, some of the prospects they have, I say that, not you, I'm not talking to anybody, but some of the prospects this team has, particularly Jamie Blackburn, really, really interesting middle infield prospect. He's in AAA right now. He's not hitting super well in AAA, but you have to expect him to come up at some point. And there's another fellow whose name is escaping my mind at the moment. It's Jesse Porter is the other guy. He's hitting 340 right now in AAA. He's a plus defender in center field. Great on the base paths. Looks like he can hit for power and average. He spent 2 games, 6 games up in the majors. Only started 2 of them, went 0 for 10 and 10 at bats. Got sent back down, but he hit 280 last year in AAA with a 3.444. He is projected to finish with a 9.1 WAR if he finishes the season in AAA over 108 games started, because he's at 3.3 right now, batting 340, 13 home runs, 35 RBIs. This guy, he should be in Arlington. Like, I don't care about the struggle. He should be in Arlington. Honestly, he should be in Pittsburgh. No, that's bias. I'd love for him to be in Pittsburgh, but he should be starting for somebody. This Jesse Porter kid is exceptional. So Texas has got some pieces to build around here on the minor league system. 2 guys does not a roster make, but you like to start. Riley Green's an interesting piece out in left field that I really, really like. So I say Texas should go rebuild mode, and they maybe should do this, that, or maybe they are. Maybe I'm just totally missing where they got all these pieces. No, they drafted Riley Green's first overall draft pick in 2019. Jamie Blackburn is their first overall draft pick in 2020. And let me just get my foot directly out of my own ass and tell you that this other kid I just mentioned, Jesse Porter, is, of course, their third-round draft pick in 2020. So all of these people are homegrown. Texas is taking the slow approach, and I can just, I was way wrong. That's interesting. Okay, well, maybe they can hold on to this thing. I don't know what the pitching stats looks like. I did not look at Texas deep enough to think, oh, man, they're actually doing something here. But because when I think about Texas, I think about James Caprielin, right? Caprielin, he's been there since 2018. He's an exceptional pitcher. He has never pitched super well in Texas, but again, Arlington is a tough place to pitch. He's a guy at 30 years old that needs to be dealt, because Texas is not competing this year or next year or in 2026. In the final year of his piece, they might finally be able to do it, but he's a guy that you deal him, you get young pieces, and then you can build yourself a championship roster. Who the fuck am I to talk? I 0 for 8 in World Series games, so don't listen to me. What was I talking about? The West, right? So that's the West. I mean, the West is where it is. You know what the West is. Seattle's actually have to do a bad start, considering they're pacing towards their worst start since 2019. But Seattle, you got to figure Sozi will do something. Sozi, Soze, Kaiser, he'll do something. Anyway, that's the American League. I mean, the biggest movers here, I guess, is the takeaway. Um, Boston is a huge mover in a positive direction as they moved from 22 games under 500 to potentially winning 100 games. It's a massive move. Baltimore is shifting in the opposite direction, not as drastically, granted, but still not shifting towards a playoff position. Um, I guess Detroit is a bad one. Like you don't highlight the bad move, but Detroit certainly looking to finish well below 500 this year, probably after the rebuild kicks into field gear. So, um, yeah, that's your American League look around. Let's look at the National League super quickly. Um, Last year in the National League East, the Braves finished in first. Atlanta finished in first at 104 and 58. Philly finished in second, 96 and 66. Miami finished in third, 73 and 89. The New York Mets finished in fourth, tied with Miami at 73 and 89. And Washington finished 70 and 92, the bottom of that league. This year, you're looking at Philly in first at 38 and 23, pacing well towards 100 wins this year. The Marlins, Miami, excuse me, at second, 36 and 24. Um, they might flirt with 100 wins, honestly. And they got to keep up pace that I don't know is super sustainable with that roster, but off to a hell of a start. And they were active early on, right? I know that the Marlins were in on the fellow that was traded away from Pittsburgh earlier this year, Yordan Alvarez. There was a lot of talks going on to try to bring him down there as like a discount power piece. So the Marlins aren't going to sit pat. They're looking for some pieces. Atlanta at 31 and 28 in third. New York at 30 and 32 in fourth. And Washington at 24 and 35 in fifth. So the bottom of the division stays more or less the same with the bottom two teams. The Marlins making a fairly big move here is really fun to watch. They're off their best start ever, actually. Marlins have had some good seasons early on, not in a while. That's not true. They were pretty competitive a couple of years back, but this is the best start they've ever had. So, can they hold that off? The Mets, despite sitting here in fourth place, are only 2 games under 500, 8.5 back, which is a pretty decent margin. And the Phillies don't seem to be a team that'll finish anywhere near 500, but they're off to the best start since 2020, right? They're definitely going to miss the playoffs, I think, at this point. Although, again, the Mets were in on some Jordan Alvarez early on, and I've heard rumblings of them kind of peeking around at getting out of this rebuild. They dealt a couple of pieces. Matt Den Decker, some of the historically Mets guys you think of are gone, and Bruce is starting to rebuild this club. Can they be something next year? Maybe not this year for sure, but they're interesting to watch. The Washington piece is depressing to some extent. They won the division in 2019 in really impressive fashion. They had a hell of a team. Remember, they had that two catcher thing with Ed Palmer and the other guy's name escapes me, but they had two exceptional catchers. And the team was just really good. They won in 2019, and they've gotten worse every year since then. They're actually pacing towards their worst season ever here in 2024. So I wouldn't expect much out of the Mets or the Nationals, but the East looks relatively the same. It'll be a 3-team race between Philly, Miami, and Atlanta. Atlanta is a weird team to me because the pieces are relatively the same as the team that won 100 games last year. There's been some slight changes. Jimmy Vega's injury and then departure from the team is different. There's a lot of young talent there that you may not think of with the team. You think about Atlanta, they've won a lot of divisions and they've been a competitive team, but Zach Veen is starting up there now. Jake Fromm is starting there now. Dylan Carlson's in his first full season in Atlanta. Still, Reese Hines looks like he's getting to get some run here at third base. It's a young team. Still has the core in place with Millard Thomas and Masatoru Oyashi, Bryce Harper, Bo Bichette. Still got the old heads there, but interesting start to see what some of these young guys can do. Really, you got to expect better out of Walker Buehler and Rod Swift, honestly, than what they've given you if they're going to become anything this year. But it is interesting. In the Central, everyone's favorite division, the National League Central, fucking dumpster fire last year. Milwaukee won the thing as 82 and 80. Cincinnati was in second at 78 and 84. St. Louis 72 and 90, finished in third. Pittsburgh at 62 and 100, tied with the Cubs. Chicago Cubs, 62 and 100 for the fourth and fifth spots. This year, you're looking at very similar, actually exact, dead on stack ranking at the moment. Milwaukee at 36 and 25, pacing towards a better record than they finished with last year. Cincinnati at 34 and 27, pacing towards a better record than they finished with last year. St. Louis at 28 and 32, pacing towards a better record they finished last year. Pittsburgh at 25 and 34, pacing towards a better record than last year. And the Cubs at 24 and 37. Hang on. Is that a better record than their pace to last year? Did I just make that up? 4, 3, 9, 3. 63 wins, posting towards a slightly better record. So the entire National League Central is going to finish, hopefully, everything stays the same, with a better record than they did last year. Still probably going to be the worst division in the National League. But, hey, it is something to think about. A couple of other pieces I noticed as I looked through this. The Cubs haven't finished above fourth place in the Central since 2015. That's obviously not going to continue here. It's important to note that Jabs has lived basically on Rule 5 and draft picks for years now, and I really like a lot of the players in the Cubs system. It does look a lot like Baltimore's used to, where there's a ton of depth here, but you're going to run out of places to put them, and so Jabs will face that same dilemma that Drew Hastings faced, where he just couldn't seem to part with any of the prospects because he was afraid of dealing the one that hit and keeping the one that didn't. And because of that, you saw guys like Nick Senzel really fall off the cliff, and a couple other guys too, right? Like, he's not the only one, but he's a prime example. So can the Cubs system continue to groom these players, pick the right ones at the right time, and deal the ones that don't make sense for players that are further off, or deal them for pieces that are ready to, when they're ready to compete? It'll be really interesting to see. You haven't seen a lot of trade activity out of Jabs in the last couple of years. So what do the Cubs do in the next couple of years? Will be fascinating. This year, forget about them. They're done. They're toast, right? As is most of the National League Central. But just fun to think about, right? What else did we notice about the Central? The Reds are trending towards their best season since 2017, which was the last year they won the Central. 2 games back currently are the Brewers. They're a good team. You got to like the Reds, what they're doing here. Could they pull this thing off? Maybe. The Brewers are definitely the stronger club in the division, but the Reds have some interesting pieces. They have some good young pieces they could deal if they wanted to. So it'll just be depending on what they decide they're going to do. You know, the Cardinals, I don't know much about. The Pirates, they're nothing this year, maybe in a couple of years. So we'll come back to the Central later on. And then the West, finally, as I wrap up this 30-minute accidental show. Last year you had the Colorado Rockies, the World Series champion Colorado Rockies, finish at 105 and 57. The Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers, 93-69 in second place. The Arizona Diamondbacks at 86 and 76 in third. San Francisco finished in fourth at 73 and 89. And San Diego brought up the rear as, if I am not mistaken, baseball's worst team. Nope, better than the Yankees. Second worst team at 56 and 106. This year, you've got the Giants. Hopefully none of you are surprised by the Giants being the top here, as they had a 18-0 start. Much more pedestrian since then, but they're sitting in the top of the division with a 5.5 game lead at 40 and 21. The Diamondbacks sit in second at 34 and 26. The Padres sit in third at 29 and 34. The Dodgers sit in fourth at 24 and 37. And here's the kicker: the Colorado Rockies sit in fifth place at 22 and 37. Second worst team in baseball behind, you guessed it, the New York Yankees. What a downfall for a team that won a World Series last year. There are a lot of things going on here in Colorado. They're running at their worst pace ever. Team ERA has jumped almost 1.5. Their BABIP's at a career high. The pitching has been horrid. They're 8 and 20 at home. Like, there is some shit going on there. Carson Thor has been patient. I don't think it's a patience that because he's expecting to pull out of this thing this season as they sit 17 games back in the division. I think it's more patience of, hey, is this core still what we need to compete in 2025? And I don't know, right? I've heard rumblings that Carlos Correa is on the block. I've heard rumblings of just a full rebuild in Colorado. He seems to be patient with this thing. Their top prospects are a couple years out. I mean, CJ Stroud's interesting maybe, but I don't know. I don't know that Colorado is going to be relevant the way they look today. The team that won that World Series last year will not be a team that brings them back to relevancy, right? It's going to have to be a total entire rebuild here. The Dodgers are also trending towards the worst season in season history, which is wild, right? So the question then has to be raised, how much of the Giants' success here is based on the fact that Colorado and the Dodgers are trending towards historical worst. It's really not that much. They have split on the season against Colorado. They haven't really played the Dodgers much so far. It's kind of irrelevant. Um, All-time worst team ERA for the Dodgers, a full point jump from 2023. They're terrible in the field, uh, both efficiency and zone rating and errors, all of it, just awful, awful, awful in the field. And that's it, guys. That's the league, right? In the American League, or in the National League, excuse me, the biggest movers here, you got to think about. I mean, it's not a huge move, but Philly jumping into first is always something you want to look at. Miami jumping into second from third. They've finished 16 games under 500. They are currently 12 over 500. That's a huge jump. Still got a lot of season to play, right? But Miami playing really well. You have to love to see that if you're anybody other than somebody in the National East, I guess. Cincinnati making a big jump. Milwaukee, technically, yes. Both these teams finished 1-2 last year, but they're both playing way better than they did last year. And obviously in the National League West, the Giants are the story, right? The Giants are the best positive story in baseball in the National League side. They're the Boston of the National League East, or National League, excuse me, as the Red Sox have come from missing the playoffs the last couple of years to being a league leader. The Giants are the same situation. Hell of a rebuild. A lot of great free agent signings. We can dig into that. That'd be a whole story in a podcast of how they built this team. That National League West has the two worst stories in baseball from my perspective, as well as you see the Dodgers and Rockies, teams that one won the World Series, one had aspirations this year that probably would have been projected to finish 1 or 2 in this league. I do ask a lot of GMs around the circles, both sitting in the basement, both seemingly on the brink of blowing it up, and you just hate to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post this up, right? Again, is refamiliarize yourself with the league. Here's what MLB Pro looks like today. Here's some context what it looked like from last year. And I covered a shitload of topics and some questions raised. What I'd like to hear from you guys is, hey, what should I do a full podcast on? What are these storylines do you want to hear about, right? Happy to do any of them. Happy to do them interview style. Bring on the GM from that team and talk to them. Happy to do it alone. Happy to bring on Anonymous. I don't know why I said Anon. Anonymous GM. Happy to bring on Scott. Whoever. Would love to hear what you guys want to hear more about. And then the format, I'll try to get going on a regular basis going forward. We'll see how that goes. But for now, appreciate you listening. If you stuck around for 32 minutes, and I'll see you later.